Hey everyone, it's Joe from Montilio's Woodshop. In this video, I'll be making this desk. The top of the desk measures 18 inches by 42 inches with an overall height of 30 inches. I'll go over more of the details in this video so you can replicate the design if you want to. First step is to break down the lumber. These 5/4 white oak will be the top. I got this lumber from a friend who owns a sawmill, and this was stored outside for a few years. It's twisted and cupped, so I'm ripping it to narrow pieces to keep as much of the thickness as possible. It was free, so I can't complain. For the legs, I'll be ripping these large slabs of white oak. I got these slabs for free from someone that was moving to a different state. Thank goodness I didn't pay a dime for them, as I'm pretty sure these are red oak and had a lot of wormholes, knots, and defects. After I split the slabs in half, I remove all of the live edge. Here's everything cleaned up. Checking the cut list, I marked all the places I needed so I can make some rough cuts using the miter saw. I added an inch or two from the final length considering the lumber I'm working with. Then onto the joiner to join a face and an edge. Off camera, I checked with the square to confirm the face and edge are at a perfect 90 degrees. Now to plane the pieces to final thickness. The pieces for the top was at 3/4 of an inch and the legs at 1 7/8 of an inch. Using the table saw, I ripped the non-jointed side of the top in preparation for glue up. Whenever I glue up panels, I put the showpiece upside down as the parallel clamps tend to apply more pressure towards the bar. This gives me the best results. After the glue dried for a few hours, I came back with a scraper to remove the glue before it completely hardened. I then reclamped and left it untouched overnight. I set the top aside and started working on the base. I ripped the stock for the legs at 1 7/8 of an inch. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but this looks like red oak to me. After ripping the legs, I ripped the aprons to 4 inches and the stretchers to 2 inches. Here I'm ripping a 1-inch piece for the front apron and planned on using the cutoff for the drawer face. I was going for a continuous grain look. Back at the miter saw, I squared one end of the legs so I can tape them all together and cut them to 29 1/4 inches. Here's everything cut to final dimensions. I'll leave the dimensions on the screen for reference. I marked all the reference points off camera, and using a domino, I cut a 10mm mortises on all aprons and stretchers using the tight setting. The legs received 10mm mortises but were cut on the loose setting to allow for adjustments during glue up, as you'll see later. Off camera, I also cut 5mm mortises on the front 1-inch apron and the corresponding legs. Now to dry fit everything and make sure nothing looks out of place. The kids were driving my wife nuts in the house, so I enlisted her help on gluing the dominoes to the aprons and stretchers. They always have a good time whenever they get to help me in the shop, and I can't wait till they get a bit older so I don't have to sand anything, ever. Now back to the tabletop. I'm using a crosscut sled to square off one side and measured to cut to final length. Starting with 80 grit, I sanded everything to 120 to remove the rough marks from the joiner, planer, and table saw. Using the router, I added a 1/4 inch round over on the legs. The blue tape is where the front and back apron and stretchers attaches to the legs that I didn't want to route. The aprons receive a round over on the bottom edge, and the stretchers receive the round over on both edges. The top of the desk also receive a 1/4 inch round over, and the bottom a 3/8 inch round over. To prevent tear out, I did the 3/8 inch round over in 2 passes. Now for more sanding. I started with the routed corners so any scratches I make on the flat sides will be removed by the orbital sander. I'm going to do this glue up in 2 steps. First, I'll glue up the legs to the side aprons and stretchers, clamp it all up and let it sit for a few hours. Just long enough to prevent the joints from moving. This is why I use the loose setting on the domino for the legs. It allows me to make small adjustments and make sure everything is flush. After a few hours, I glued the rest of the base together. Using a small mallet and a square, I made sure everything is flush and even. Clamped it all up and let it sit overnight. Now for the final sanding of the top. Again, I started with the rounded edges and worked my way up to 220 grit. After sanding, I used the vacuum and a clean cloth to prep the surface for applying the finish. I'll be using my go-to finish, Natura Onecoat Clear. It's a hard wax oil that is very easy to apply. I'm mixing 3 parts oil to 1 part hardener. Pour the finish and use a spreader to coat the surface evenly. I'll leave a link to my Amazon for the finish and the items used to apply it, as well as all the items and tools used throughout the video. Thank you for your support. Use a non-scouring pad to work the finish into the wood. Let it sit for 3 to 4 minutes and remove excess with a cotton cloth. If you're interested, check out my detailed application video. Off camera, I made these 3/4 stock that are about 2.5 inches long as a way to mount the tabletop to the base. The holes on the block are oversized to allow for wood movement. Use the CA glue and wood glue trick to attach the mounts and clamp to dry. Time to add the finish to the base. I use Natura Onecoat White. This has a thick consistency and makes application a breeze with a white pad. Same as the tabletop, let the finish set for 3 to 4 minutes and remove or buff off the excess. Here I'm locating the mounting holes and making sure that we have an even overhang on all sides. Transfer the holes using a scribe, pre-drilled and mounted the base to the top. While the table is upside down, I took measurements for the drawer. I have never made a drawer in my life, but I'll share what I learned on this project. For the sides, I'm using 1/2 inch plywood and 1/4 inch plywood for the drawer bottom. The sides are 2.5 inch tall and the drawer measures 14 by 34 inches. Depending on which drawer slide is used, the measurements could vary. Construction of the drawer is going to be simple. I use pocket holes in the long pieces so the drawer front can hide the holes once it's installed. Using a regular 1/8 inch curved blade, I cut a dado on all the drawer sides. After the first cut, I slowly sneak in on the dado as 1/4 inch plywood is not a true 1/4 inch. Now that we have everything cut, it's time to assemble the drawer. Using glue in the dado will help with rigidity as the drawer will be subjected to a lot of pushing and pulling. Since the side aprons aren't flush with the inside of the legs, I had to glue and screw a piece of 1/2 inch plywood so I can mount the drawer slides. I clamped the drawer slide to the apron and used the scribe to mark the center. Pre-drill, screw, and check for full range of motion. I took some measurements off camera and transferred them to the drawer so I can mount the other part of the slide. Not too bad for my first drawer. I don't know why this intimidated me for the longest time. Now to add a drawer knob that my wonderful daughter picked out at Home Depot. I used a ruler that was about an 1/8 inch thick as a spacer and marked the ends. I clamped the drawer front to the drawer before sliding it out. Pre-drilled the holes using a countersink bit and screwed the drawer to the drawer front. And now for the moment of truth. I'm pretty happy with how this project turned out. The lumber had a lot of imperfections, but it was free. Thanks for watching, and until next time.